Alright, so this is gonna be episode 4 of team profiles for set G. So this team's gonna be on Sand in set G. And so um yeah, this is gonna be a bit of an explanatory video on Sand as well. And yeah, just covering kind of Sand's role in set G and sort of, you know, um how to approach Sand, right? So yeah, Sand is a mechanic, that was introduced in Generation Two, um, as a move, Sandstorm, and um, so what it did was it just set Sand onto the board, right? And what Sand did was, um, at the end of every single turn, all Pokemon on the board, that weren't uh, Rock, Steel, or Ground type would take 1/16 of their health. So, yeah. So it was introduced alongside the Steel type as a way to give it a sort of, mechanic built around it as well, right? And so, then, as they added more mechanics to the archive of their game, they introduced the ability Sandstream, which when the Pokemon that has Sandstream comes in, it summons a Sandstorm, right? So now it gave you a more efficient way to set up Sand, and as a result, and a way to set up, a way to build rather around Sand team, around the Sand mechanic rather, right? And so the kind of concept with Sand is that Sand is a way to support wall breaking teams, wall breaking Pokemon, and a way to mitigate some effects such as from moves such as Leech Seed and leftovers, right? Items such as leftovers, right? So that's kind of the idea of Sand, right? So the reason why it seems like such a mystified mechanic in the game is because the way to balance some of these residual health effects, right? And also is a way to further support wall breaking Pokemon, right? So yeah, right. So that's kind of Sand in a nutshell, right? And so this team is going to be going over sort of how to play Sand and Setchi, right? And so, yeah, right. So a lot of these Pokemon that are on this team are from like latest Gen 5, right? And then this Pokemon indeed is kind of just taxes for this format, but you can really see that the concept of Sand really hasn't changed. And the style of Sand really hasn't changed since, some of these Pokemon have come out, like Terrakion and in particular the restricted for this team, Dialga, right? And so, yeah, this concept can apply to, any VGC format, as far back as, Gen 4 when Dialga came out, right? Um, so, yeah, right. Kind of one thing I wanted to highlight making this video is that, you know, um, although we've seen a lot of additions to, you know, VGC. Some concepts, still remain the same in terms of how they're supposed to function, right? And Sand is no different, right? Yeah. So yeah, in contrast to like Sand and like Set H, right, where Sand was sort of a tool to mitigate some of the power creep that we're seeing, right? With the lack of um legendary Pokemon sort of balancing out all these, pseudo legendaries, it was very hard to sort of conceptualize concepts for that format, right? And so as a result, you got a lot of, redundancy and a lot of overlap, right? And so it was very difficult to sort of envision how the format could shape out, without, something like Archaludon, Archaludon, and and you know, Pokemon like Dragonite, running around, right? So yeah, um, it's much easier, when you have restricted and you have legendaries. So that's kind of one why I want to approach this video, right? So yeah, so this is Sand Team centered around Tyranitar, right? And like I said, the restricted is Dialga, and then the rest of the core is speed control and Indeedee, and your carry support, which is Terrakion. Right? So that's generally how you want to build sand teams. Is that you want to build them, you know, with your sand setter, which is probably just going to be Tyranitar, right? And then Pokemon to support it, right? So the beauty of sand is that sand allows you to, put a lot of um, Pokemon that normally wouldn't be able to, um, thrive by themselves onto your team in certain styles and really be able to support them so that they can really thrive, right? So, for example, a Pokemon like Terrakion, right? This Pokemon is, part of the Three Musketeers. I think they're called, um, or the Swords of Justice, rather. I think the Three Musketeers is their colloquial name, but yeah, they're called the Swords of Justice, right? And then you have the carry, which is Terrakion, and you have the utility, which is Cobalion, and then you have like the mid range in Virizion, right? And so generally, Terrakion hasn't really seen playing doubles that much, unless it's been on like the subject of like teams and cheese teams and stuff like that. But for the most part, Terrakion really hasn't seen success in doubles. Besides playing like beat up justified Terrakion. And so it's identity in doubles is kind of mystified, right? But this Pokemon is very devastating. Is a very devastating doubles Pokemon, and it has the very powerful carry typing and rock fighting, and then it has very good move pool, and has access to Sacred Sword, and also the ability to act as a pivot tool with a move like with an ability like Justify, right? So yeah, it's kind of sad to see that Terrakion really hasn't had its time to shine in VGC, right? So this is gonna help alleviate that a little bit. All right. So yeah, again, right? So core of a sand team, you know, is generally you're gonna have a good sand setter, right? Probably gonna be Terrakion, and then you know for restricted, in a restricted format, you probably gonna run something like Dialga, right? And then you have your speed control, and then you have your other support, right? So yeah, right. So support I chose for this team is Terrakion, right? I played more of a carry support Terrakion, and this is not to say Terrakion is a carry support. It's just this is a carry support Terrakion, right? So before we go over to Terrakion, let's just go over the two main Pokemon for the team, right? So this is so you have Tyranitar, right, which is a mid-range Pokemon, right? This one has an Assault Vest, Ground Terra, and has Stone Edge, Crunch, Protect, Stomp, and Tantrum, HP Attack, Atom of Nature, right? So the idea is that it's kind of similar to like a Set H Tyranitar, in where you know um, you just want to have an extremely high stat mid-range Pokemon on your team, right? And so to do that, you give it an Assault Vest on top of the Sandstream, so you're effectively doubling the special defense without having any special defense investments, right? Then you have a nice neutral Terra type so that you can eat physical attacks, right? And so that's kind of the idea, right? The other mid-range Pokemon is Dialga, right? This is Dragon Terror, Life Orb Dialga with Draco Meteor, Earth Power, Fire Blast, Flash Cannon, HP Special Attack Modest Nature. This one has Telepathy, right? So the idea is that you're gonna partner it with your supports, and you're gonna be able to use like full targeted moves like bulldoze, and Yoga is immune to them, right? And then you have Indeedee, male Indeedee. Again, this is Fairy Terra. Let's change it right now actually, but yeah, Fairy Terra Indeedee. And so the idea is that I forget something. Um, yeah, you have options to set up knockouts for the sand, set up knockouts for you know um Dialga, right? And then you have Terrakion, right? So Rock Terra Terrakion, so you can preserve your Rock typing throughout your Terra. And this one is Sacred Sword, Rock Slide, Bulldoze, and Protect, right? Jolly Nature, Attack Speed, with Justified, right? So yeah, it's kind of a shift from you know um it's kind of a shift from more of a carry style Terrakion, where you run like full attacks and with more devastating moves like Stone Edge and stuff like that. Then yeah, so that's the core of the team, right? And so this is not like how you should set in stone play sand, right? For set G. Um, there's a lot of sand setters in set G, like Sandaconda and stuff like that. It's just generally if you're gonna want to, out stuff like Koraidon and stuff like that, you're gonna need something that can reliably set up sand. And so that's kind of why you want to run Tyranitar over something like maybe trying for like a prankster hit Sandstorm or something like that. This is generally more consistent, and so yeah. Right. So the pivots for this team are Arcanine, right? So um, this is Citrus Bear Arcanine, Rock Terra, Soon Arcanine. Um, and it's Adamant Nature, 252 attack, 132 HP, 124 special defense, and it's has Intimidate, has Flare Blitz, Rock Slide, Protect, Help in Hand. So yeah, so this is more of a support, so more leaning towards more support mid range. Um, as opposed to something that's more carry mid range like Tyranitar and Dialga, right? So this one's more for compensating for the fact that Tyranitar and Dialga are going to need to be on the board for a long time because they only have single target moves, and so to compensate for that, you have the Sand, which increases Tyranitar's special defense, and then you have your pivots that have Intimidate, right? So the other pivot is Salamence, right? Steel Terra, Salamence with Safety Goggles, has Intimidate, Timid Nature, Special Attack Speed, and has Protect, Heat Wave, Air Slash, and Draco Meteor. So again, right, another pivot that can help out with Tyranitar and Dialga's special defense. I mean attack. I mean defense. um, and yeah, right. So yeah, that's kind of the angle you want to go for Sand, right? And so yeah, um, One thing I just want to, highlight in this team is that this team has 3 rock Pokemon on it, right? And, you know, we don't really see teams that are really centered into one type in VGC too often. And it's because generally, when you're playing a certain style, right, it appears that other styles' power level seems to change, right? And so as a result, we don't get teams like this, that really center into certain styles, right? And so, yeah, it may seem odd that this team doesn't really have something like like a Chempao on it or something like that, but this is just sand, right? So yeah, nothing really more to look into there, right? So yeah, this is Sand Set G. Hope you like this team. Hope you like this video, and thank you for listening. I'll see you in the next video.